Hello and welcome to Train Signal. You're watching video number 15, Installing and Administering Linux Samba Server. So in this video, first we're going to talk about what is Samba anyway. Then we'll talk about how to administer Samba, install Samba, and then we'll go through a scenario using Samba back at the Big Sky Fishing Supply Company. So let's find out what is Samba. Well, Samba is an open source suite. It's designed to provide file and print services to all types of SMB/CIFS clients, including Windows clients. In fact, that's what it's usually used for. Now, Samba's been around since 1992, and it's freely available under the GNU General Public License, or the GPL. Samba runs on Linux, IBM 390, OpenVMS, IBM AIX, and many other non-Windows operating systems. The purpose of Samba is to make the non-Windows host function as a Windows host. This allows the non-Windows host, such as your Linux server, to appear in the network neighborhood on the Windows PC clients. Now, the name Samba originates from SMB, and Samba provides file and print services, authentication and authorization, name resolution, and service announcement for browsing to make non-Windows hosts appear as Windows hosts. So let's move on to administering Samba. Alright, now one thing you should know about administering Samba is that Samba has its own user list. So it doesn't use the Linux database, it's not using the Windows Active Directory database, it has its own user list. Now, because of this, when you go to remove a Samba user, first you would delete the Samba user, then you would delete the Linux user after that. Now, you can edit Samba users manually by editing the SMB PASSWD or password file in the etc Samba directory. Normally you wouldn't be editing that file directly, you'd be using some graphical tool. That's what most people do. But you can edit the file directly if you need to. Now, the SMB password file is not created until the first time that you use Samba. So it's not installed with a little blank file or anything. So when you go to use a program, there's actually a program called SMB Password that writes to the SMB password file. When you go to use that program, it'll give you an error the first time that says that the file doesn't exist, and it will create it for you. That's okay, that's normal. So you can use this SMB password program to remove a Samba user, like this with the -X option, or to add a Samba user with the -A option. But like I said, normally you'll use GUI tools. Now, Windows uses the Server Message Block Protocol to share files. Common Internet File System, or CIFS, is an enhanced version of SMB, and it is really what is used today, although most people still call it SMB. Samba is a very complex program. There's a vast amount of information available for it on the Internet, such as what you'll find at www.samba.org. There's also a great many books available on Samba. If you go to some of the popular book websites like Amazon, type in Samba, you'll find a lot of different books available for Samba. Now, Samba actually consists of two services, or two daemons that run. They are SMBD and NMBD. So this is the Server Message Block file sharing program here, and then NMBD is the NetBIOS name daemon that runs. Now, to start Samba, there's actually a single script that will start both of these daemons at the same time, and it's located in etc rc.d/init.d/smb, and then after the SMB you either use start or stop or a number of other keywords. You can, of course, also start Samba through the GUI services program. Now, the main Samba configuration file is etc.smb.conf. You can edit that file manually if you want, but most people use a GUI tool to do that. Now, after you've installed Samba, you'll have a new administrative tool called System Config Samba. This is the Fedora Linux tool that's used just to configure Samba. Really, it just edits this SMBconf, or it will edit the SMB password file. Now, this is not to be confused with SWAT. We're going to talk about SWAT in just a second. SWAT is the Samba web administration tool. But first, I want to point out that Samba can also be used to print from a Windows client to the Linux server and from the Linux client to a Windows server. So besides file sharing, it can be used for printing as well. Now with Samba printing, Linux printers can show up in the network neighborhood of the Windows systems so that they can be added as a printer much easier. Another graphical tool that you can install to administer Samba is SWAT, the Samba Web Administration Tool. It's a web-based tool, and once it's installed, you can access it by going to your localhost web browser on port 901, like this right here, localhost:901. So let's talk about installing Samba and SWAT. Now, by default, the Samba server is not installed with Fedora Core 5, but you can specify that it is installed at the time of installation, or you can go back later and you can install it through the Linux Package Manager. That's Add Remove Software. However, Fedora does come with the SMB client tools. So there are some client tools that are installed by default. You don't have to go install anything special. So the client tools would just be used to go from the Linux server, or the Linux system we'll call it, to a Windows client that was already sharing files. So SMB client is a command line tool that queries Windows clients or SMB clients and tells you all the different shares that they have. So it's essentially browsing from a command line, browsing like through network neighborhood from a command line. Now you can also open an SMB file share over the network using this URL. So it's like smb://username:password at hostname/share. And if you don't have DNS configured, you may need to use an IP address for the host name. But that's the format. You can actually browse using that format. Now once Samba is installed, you can also install SWAT. SWAT is the web-based administration tool. To do that, here's the instructions. First you do yum /install /samba-SWAT. That downloads and installs SWAT. Once it's installed, you have to edit this file for the zinetd. Now, when you install Samba SWAT, one of the dependencies is zinetd, and Yum will actually go out and get that and install it for you. So we talked about super servers, inetd and zinetd. Zinetd is a super server that runs other services, but SWAT requires that zinetd be installed and running to start and stop SWAT. So it installs zinetd for you, and then what you have to do is go edit this SWAT configuration file and change it from disabled being yes to disabled being no. Then you restart or you start the zinetd and set it to run automatically, and then SWAT will automatically be started. So with that, let's move on to our scenario, and we'll get some real hands-on experience with Samba and SWAT. So in our scenario at the Big Sky Fishing Supply Company, you want your Linux server to be able to replace your Windows file server. Now by doing that, the Linux server would be the centralized file server for the group of Windows clients. To do this, perform the following tasks. You're going to install the Samba server, install SWAT, create a new Linux user and a Samba user, create a Linux folder called shared, share that Linux folder through Samba. On the Windows system, log in as the test user, then verify that the new test user can browse the folder and read and write files using Network Neighborhood. So we have a lot of work to do, so let's get started. So I just moved over here to our Linux server, and what I've done before the video started is I started the package manager. This is the package manager. What I did is I went up to Applications right here, and I clicked Add Remove Software. That's all I did. And this takes a little bit of time to develop the list of applications you can install. So I just want to do that ahead of time so we didn't have to sit here and wait for it to figure out the applications that could be installed. So first we need to install Samba. To do that, you go to the Servers section right here, and you scroll down to the bottom, and it says Windows File Server. This is actually Samba. It really doesn't tell you that anywhere here, like it should, but this is Samba, Windows File Server. So if I check that, it says one of one optional packages are selected. So if I click Optional Packages, it shows me the optional packages System Config Samba. That's the GUI Fedora Linux tool used to configure Samba. That's not SWAT. It's not a web-based administration tool. It's just a graphical program inside Fedora Linux. So I'm going to click Close, then I'm going to click Apply. Now it tells me there's some packages that are selected here, a number of packages, and an update. I'll click OK or Continue. Now it's going to tell me there are some dependencies, and the dependency is Samba Common. That's okay. I'm going to click Continue. And it's going to sit here and download and install Samba. So while it does that, I'm going to pause the video and I'm going to come back as soon as it's done so you don't have to sit here and wait through the download. Be right back. Alright, so we're back and the software has completed a successful installation. I had sat here for about 5 minutes downloading and applying packages and configuring it, and it's done. So what we can do is just click OK here, and the Add Remove Package program automatically closes out. And the next thing we want to do is start Samba. So to start Samba, if I go to System, then Administration, then to Server Settings. Actually, this is a new folder here. Previously there was just Services was right here in this list. Now there's Server Settings, and over to the right here, here's Services, and then here's a Samba configuration tool. And that configuration tool is actually System Config Samba. That's the GUI tool that comes with Fedora Linux, just for Samba. So we're going to go to Services for now, and let's go see about the Samba service. So if I scroll down here, the name of the Samba service is SMB, that's one of them, and the other one is NMBD. You notice here that this stops and starts the Samba NMBD, or SMBD and NMBD daemons used to provide SMB network services. So I want this to run all the time, so I'm going to check this. I want it to run when the system boots back up, and that's another reason I'm checking it. And I'm going to say Save. I want to save that, and then I want to say Start. And SMB was started, and so was NMBD. So it started them both at the same time. And we could have done this from the command line as well. So let me close this out. Let me show you how to do this from the command line. If I open a terminal window and I cd into etc rc.d, then cd into init.d, and then ls-l, see this Samba or SMB utility right here, I can do /SMB stop. Whoop, got to type it right. SMB stop. There we go, and it stopped the services, and I can do SMB start, and it started them back up. So just an alternate way of doing it. And if I do ps-ef and I grep SMB, you can see there's two SMBDs running right there. If I do ps-ef and I grep NMB, you can see there's an NMBD running right there. Now let's go look at the Samba config. If I cd into etc/Samba and do ls-l, here's the smb.conf file. Here's the SMB password and SMB users. If I cat the smb.conf, if I pipe that to more, you can see this is the main Samba configuration page. Here's my work group, here's my server string. All the way at the end of this is there's some sample folders and shares that you can create if you uncomment these. So that's the main configuration file for Samba. So I'm going to exit out of this. Alright, now let's install SWAT. SWAT is the Samba web-based administration tool, and to do this I'm going to use yum. I'm going to use the command line yum. So if I go back here to a terminal window and I type yum space install space samba dash swat, SWAT with a T, press enter. It goes out here and it finds the SWAT tool. It's going to take it a little bit of time to look through the different packages that it has available. And it tells me it has two packages. One is installing Samba-SWAT. It's for an i386 architecture. It's version 3.0.22-1 for Fedora Core 5. And it's in the updates repository, and it's 7.2 megs. Then there's dependencies. The dependency that it's installing is zinetd. So it says, are you sure you want to do this? I'll say Y for yes. And it goes through here and it downloads the packages from that updates repository and the core repository. It's downloading pretty fast here. Alright, we have the applications. It's installing the applications. Completed. We installed Samba SWAT and the zinetd. I love it. I love yum. It makes installing applications so easy. Alright, so we installed SWAT. One thing we need to do to get SWAT started is we're going to cd into etc zinetd, and I'm going to do an ls-l, and here's SWAT right here. Here's the configuration file for SWAT. I'm going to vi this configuration file. Whoops, got to type it right. vi SWAT. SWAT. There we go. So here's the config file for SWAT. Now by default, SWAT is disabled equals yes, so it's disabled. So to enable it by default, I'm going to say disabled equals no. That's how you disable it. I'm going to press colon, right quit. So we edited the SWAT file, and I want to clarify there that when we did that, by default it said disabled equals yes. So that meant that when zinetd looked at the file and it said, do I want to start SWAT, disabled equals yes said, no, you don't want to start it because it's disabled. So what we did is we changed it to disabled equals no, which means enabled equals yes, right? So we wanted it enabled, and that's what it's going to be now. When the zinetd starts, it's also going to start SWAT. So to start the zinetd, I'm going to go to System, Administration, Server Settings, and then into Services. I'm going to scroll down to the bottom down here, and here's zinetd. Right now it's stopped. It's stopped by default. We just installed it, but it's going to run when the system reboots at the next run level change to run level 5. So now I'm just going to start it. It says it was started successfully, and there's the PID, and it's running. So now if we go and we start our web browser, we should be able to access SWAT. So to access SWAT, you type in http://localhost:901, and it gives you a prompt here, and I'm going to put in root. Oh, we got to put in a password. root, tab down, and type in the password, Big Sky Fishing. There we go. So we're inside SWAT. So you see here, welcome to SWAT. Here's Samba documentation. Here's the different daemons that can run, the different config files, the different administrative utilities, different client tools. You know, so many different tools in here that we really haven't talked about at all because, like I said, SWAT is or Samba and SWAT, for that matter, are very complex programs with lots of different features and functionality. Here's books, here's websites you can go to, all sorts of stuff. So you can go into globals here. Here's global settings, my work group, my server name, encrypt passwords, host to allow, host to deny, browser options, DNS, all sorts of stuff. Here's the different shares. Right now there's no shares. Here's the printers being shared, no printers. Here's the wizard. This will help you rewrite your config file. Here's the status. It says SMBD is running, NMBD is running. You can stop and restart right here. And here's view. View is your current config file. So this is at smb.conf. And then, of course, here's passwords. So this is SWAT. For now, I'm going to close out SWAT. And we're going to use instead the Fedora Linux configuration tool over here. I'm going to click on Samba. So this is the Samba server configuration tool that comes with Fedora Linux when you install the Samba server. Certainly not as fully functional as SWAT. Doesn't have as many features at all, but it can get you by. It has just the basics. So let's go in here and let's configure Samba. I'm going to go into server settings, and I'm going to change the work group to Big Sky Fishing SU for supply. And just server description is Samba server. That's fine. For security, we have user authentication, no guest account, and that's good. That's good. We're going to leave that as is. So now we need to create a Linux user. To do that, I'm going to go to System, Administration, Users and Groups. I'm going to create a new user. The user's name is going to be D. Davis. Full name is David Davis. The password is fishing with a capital F. And I'll say OK. Alright, and we created this new user. Let's go in and let's look at groups. We do have a sales group here. I'm going to add, let's go to users, let's click on D. Davis, and let's add D. Davis to the sales group. Right there. So now D. Davis is a member of the sales group. Sales D. Davis. Okay. So we have a Linux user. Now we need to go create a Samba user because that's a different kind of user. So I'm going to close this out, and here I'm going to go to Samba users. Add user. Here's the username. So see, this is why we had to add Samba or Linux users first, is so that the user would be listed in here. In fact, what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to cancel out of this. We're going to have to close the Samba configuration, and that's because that user list that you were looking at right there is only pulled when the program starts. So we had to close it, go back in here, click Add User, and there's D. Davis. Now, D. Davis appeared because we just had to restart the program. So the Windows username is going to be the same, D. Davis. Samba password is the same, fishing with a capital F. And I'm going to say OK. And OK. Now let's create a directory. And to do that, I'm going to go to Applications. I'm going to open another terminal window. I'm going to cd into the root directory. I'm going to make a directory called shared. I'm going to do ls-l. So here's the shared directory. I want the sales users to have access to that. I'm going to do a change group sales on shared. Then I'm going to do change mod 770 shared ls-l. Alright, and there's our root owned, but the sales group has full permissions, and that's our shared directory. So we created our shared directory. Now let's close this. Let's go back to the Samba configuration tool here. I'm going to add a Samba share. I'm going to click Browse. I'm going to go to the root directory. I'm going to find this shared folder. Double click on that. Notice how it says Selection Shared right there. I'm going to say OK. Description is shared sales files. Going to make it writable and visible. Then for access, I'm going to say only allow access to the specified or specific users. I'm going to check David and say OK. Alright, and we just created our Samba share. So I'm going to be extra careful here, and I want to restart the Samba server. I'm going to go into Administration, Services, go down to SMB, and I'm going to do Restart. Alright, we have new PIDs and it was restarted, so I'm going to close this out. Close this out and close this out. So we've done everything we need to do here on the Linux server. The next thing we need to do is go to the Windows client, log in as the user that's trying to access this shared directory, and then just make sure we can read to it and write to it and really see all the files that we will be putting on the Linux server. So with that, I'm going to close out the Linux server, minimize that, and I'm going to use remote desktop, and I'm going to connect over to a Windows system on the network. The Windows system is called Client 2. I'm going to connect to it. I'm going to log in here as D. Davis. The password is phishing with a capital F. Alright, I'm going to go to Start, My Computer. I'm going to go to My Network Places. I'm going to click View Workgroup Computers. And here notice there's the Samba server, server 1. So this is our Linux server right here. Notice it's inside Network Neighborhood and we're just browsing to it. So if I double click on that, notice it has the shared directory here. It automatically mapped my home directory, which is something that Samba does by default. It just doesn't show up in the list of shares. And then notice even that there's some test printers. There's printers on that Linux server, and they're showing up right here through Samba. So I can right click on this, I can open, connect to it. Let's go into the shared directory, and here I can create a new Microsoft Word document. I can right click here and I can create a new, let's create an Excel spreadsheet. I can create a new PowerPoint document. So let's run Word. Let's open this and we'll type in this is a test. I'm going to save that. I'm going to open the Excel document. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Do a formula. There we go. Put some numbers in there. So I'm going to save that out. And we got our PowerPoint presentation here. Put that in there. Alright, so we have our 3 different files here on what looks like a Windows server, but it's really a Linux server. So if I minimize this and I go back to my Linux server, if I go to Computer, I browse to the file system and to the shared directory. Here's my different documents right here in that shared directory. So if I open the test Word doc, it's going to use OpenOffice Writer to do this. We can see right there, there's our test. This is a test from OpenOffice Writer. Make a really big font there. I'm going to save that. I'm going to say yes, I want to save it in Windows format. And let's close that out. We can open our other documents there, but I think you get the point as to how we're able to share files back and forth with the Windows client thinking it's talking to a Windows server, but really it's talking to this Linux server in a shared directory that's on the Linux server. So with that, we successfully completed our test of Samba. We installed Samba, we installed SWAT, we created a new Linux user and a Samba user to go along with it. We created a Linux folder called Shared. We shared that Linux folder through Samba. We set permissions on it, don't forget. On the Windows system, we logged in as the test user. The username and password matched. We verified that the new test user can browse the folder and put files in the folder, and then I could even open those files up over on the Linux server. So we were able to successfully complete the task in our scenario for the Big Sky Fishing Supply Company, and we can move on to the conclusion of this video. So in conclusion, in this video, we learned about what is Samba. We learned a little bit of the history of Samba, where it came from, what all it can do. We learned about how to administer Samba, the different programs, files, and directories that control it, how to install Samba, how to install SWAT that goes along with Samba, how to start it through the XynetD, and then in our scenario, we tested all these things we learned out on some real systems, a real Windows system and a real Linux system, and saw that it really did work. So with that, we've come to the end of video number 15 on installing and administering Samba. Thank you very much.